Hello, welcome back to another episode of Somewhere Between a Film and TV podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Parra, and number one, thank you so much for listening and watching. Number two, if you could, please down below, like, comment, and subscribe. And remember, everything we review here will always have full spoilers, but I gotta tell you, right now, if you have not seen The Long Walk, please, I implore you, stop listening to this and come back to it later. Please watch it. I'm just going to give you my score right now. It's a 5 out of 5. I'm not going to tell you why just yet, but go now, please. Just hit pause, subscribe, and like, and then come back to it, because I'm just going to tell you right now, right off the bat, did I love it? Did I hate it? Or am I somewhere between on it? Loved it so much. I have been dying to talk about this movie. I genuinely think that it was funny because while I was looking up the genre that this fell under, it was under like horror sci-fi, and I was like, well, I mean, horror is interesting that it falls into that category, and that I saw it and I was like, okay, this movie is horrifying. It's a different kind of horror, but I absolutely think that it falls into it in a sense. But let's backtrack a little bit. Let's get started. The Long Walk is directed by Francis Lawrence. It's written by J.T. Molnar, and it is about when teens participate in a grueling high-stakes contest where they must continuously walk or be shot by a member of their military escort. And yes, that's definitely the bare bones aspect of it. But this movie, it's interesting. I every once in a while have a movie that's really difficult to talk about. Not in the sense that I don't have a lot to say. It's in the sense that I think that this movie is about 20 different things, and it's about a lot just in terms of what it wants to say, what it wants to cover, what it's about. But let's get into the specifics of the movie itself, just alone at all. And I think that Stephen King wrote this sort of as I believe it's his first published work. And from what I understand, he wrote this as a kind of parable about young men in the Vietnam War. And you can sense that, but what's weird about this is it's so prescient still, and it's still so timely and relevant. And from what I understand, a lot of the casting they had to go through was intentional, and I feel that. I do think that the casting of this was intentional. Of course, you always want the right actors for the right thing. But I did also get the sense that they cast the people who they cast in their roles as really efficiently as possible, that they wanted them to... I feel like they cast them for a purpose. And Mark Hamill is brilliant in this. I think that the movie itself, all of the main characters have such an understated ability to them, this sort of reality that they're steeped in, that they're on their last straw, that this is the end all be all. And Mark Hamill comes in and is such an eccentric personality in it. He's like got the loud and gruff voice, and there's an almost kind of otherworldly presence to him, just antagonistically. He's just a straight up villain. I'm not even going to use the word antagonist. He's just like a cold, weird, heartless being in this. You never see his eyes under the glasses, which is how you know that they're trying to obscure the humanity within him. I think it's so smart to never show his eyes, because that's where a lot of expression comes from. So every time he's on the screen, it's weird because it's like an almost intentionally not robotic performance, but so straightforward that it ends up adding a lot of additional layers. I don't even know how the performance is really pulled off, but it really is. And credit to Mark Hamill for that as the major in this. And I think that him being this character, getting ahead of myself here, but it adds this sort of weird presence to him later when there's only two people left, or maybe three, and Cooper Hoffman's character is like, just shut up, man, just stop talking, just be quiet. And you can tell that they're beaten because this is towards the end of the movie, and Mark Hamill's still going. He's like, that's the spirit. You got this. And it's just so weird. It feels almost like they set him back to default. That's just like the thing that he has to say. But we were talking about this in Demon Slayer, and it kind of funny enough, I feel like it's still sort of relevant here to an extent. All of these characters are here for a purpose. All of these characters are here as motivating forces for something. And the reason why I think this movie's a little bit difficult to talk about is I think that the characters are representative of different ideals. Each of them have a different thing, a different belief system. And what ends up making this so beautiful and so well done is they're still forming friendship, even and they know what are their last few days of being alive. Yes, anybody can win it, but I think what kind of gets misconstrued about movies like this is, yes, you do sort of add that sort of, could I do this? How far would I get? Could I beat this? And part of you, it's an almost wish fulfillment thing. And then you see, what the end result is, and you're very quickly reminded. And with this, sometimes what I think gets lost in translation is Squid Game, for example. I remember I had a huge issue with people kind of capitalizing on what that show was saying, just in terms of economic value and why they were at that place in the first point, because it is a satire of a sort. It is a critique on not even American society, but on Korean society. And Hunger Games, what that had going for it, I'm not going to ever discredit those movies. Those movies are brilliant, and so are the books. I think that they're really clever media satire, and also really smart about how we exploit people and how we exploit entertainment, and how that can lead to that point. Here, this is bare bones stripped of all of that, though. There are cameras that sort of are mentioned, but they're never really shown, and we know that there's spectacle being made of this. I'll talk about the unbelievably haunting ending later, but we understand that. One thing I really liked about this is that this movie also touches on the illusion of choice. I do highly recommend this movie, but I also need you to understand right now that the violence is not spectacle. In this movie is actually really difficult to sit through and to watch once you realize what it's doing. There's one really early on. The reason why I said that I think the casting has this sort of intentionality behind it is because one of my favorite movies from a couple years ago was Jojo Rabbit. And the main character in that is just really good in it. And so at the very beginning, when you see him, he looks, I saw a picture earlier, but clearly he's grown, but he looks just a couple years older than that. And when they were talking about how this boy does not look an age over 16, and I think it was Ben Wang's character who says, if he's over 16, I'll eat my own shoe. And he ends up being the first death that you see. He gets shot in the jaw, essentially. It goes straight through. It's really graphic. And then it cuts to the title. It feels like you're like half an hour in already, the long walk. And all of the violence in this is done with such a realism that it starts to get really uncomfortable. You fully understand the stakes of what's happening here. I think that this movie has such a brutal and violent force to it, and it ends up being haunting after a long while, and it sits with you when it's over. I think that the smart thing to do here, this movie has so much heart in it. It could have easily been cold and brutal, and that's it. And you're just watching these people trudge to their death, and they could have been immensely unlikable, but they all bring much to this movie's, I'm not going to say detriment, because it's the opposite of that. Much to this, your own detriment, really, watching this. It has so much heart. Once you start getting yourself attached to these people, the Musketeers, even though there's 5 of them, I believe, they have a really kindred spirit together. They have just so much likability in their ability to, be able to give each other a hard time because they're young boys, but also this movie has moments where it's really funny, and then has moments where it's just like you're sort of like this emotionally watching it, and you watch these people develop a friendship towards just the end of it. And then even the people in the background, this movie, what I thought was really smart about the casting as well is, yes, it, from what I understand in the book that I read, there's a couple changes. The ending is different. The miles per hour thing was requested by Stephen King himself to go from 4 miles per hour to 3 miles per hour. I won't lie to you. I did this on purpose. And once this movie was done, I was like, I had to know. I was on the treadmill for a while. And no, I will never make it 360 miles. Also, by the way, just mentioning this offhandedly, Converse, that's crazy. I would have been screwed immediately. I was talking about this with my girlfriend that I saw it with, and we were like, okay, where would you, like, of these characters, this is the sort of thing that this does as well. Where are you tapping out? For me, I have a torn knee. My knee's completely gone. Would have been early on, probably like that steep incline where half of them go. Or I would have been one of the ankle people. Or I, unfortunately, hate to say it, the people that had to use the bathroom would have been one of them. Without a doubt. And what I like that's also unflinching about this is you just know that Letterboxd would have been filled with people that are like, well, what about them having to use the bathroom? They address that in this. Not only do they address it, they show it more than once. And there's a really sort of gross and mean scene in this where this guy has diarrhea, and they show the full thing. They show all of it. They show it coming out of him. And he dies due to this. I believe this is this character this happens to. And so there's this image of, the poop along with the body as well. That's just like what goes from kind of a sort of humorous, like it's a potty humor thing for sure. It feels, I remember this is kind of like where my gut sank a little bit, because you realize how often we utilize that kind of thing for humor. And then once that happens and it's shown and that's the cause of death, it's really just tough to think about. But what I admire so much is this movie could have easily gone the route of, we'll either change the ending to be like, more friendly, and then like, oh, well, we can make the rule that like, oh, maybe we can have 4 people win or any of that. No, I admire this movie's complete ability to engage and follow through on the premise. You do only end up with one winner, but what I loved so much about the individual characters is they all had really great characterization. You get to know a core, I would say 7 to 8 of them, but there's a couple of, the Musketeers are the main focus. And Cooper Hoffman and David Johnson, oh my God, are unbelievably good in this. Both of them. David Johnson in particular, he is the standout. He's the best part of this, but I'm going to touch on Cooper Hoffman because I know that due to David Johnson, being the best part of it, Cooper Hoffman's kind of going just a little bit under the radar. He is the main character, though, and I think he's brilliant in this. I think that there's a subversion thing here that I noticed that they did, because it starts off with a letter to Garrity, and honestly, the only part of my brain that I was like, okay, this movie, just working the way it works, he's not going to win at the end of this. I was like, it starts off with the letter. It would be way too clear. It would make you kind of have a sense of, not urgency, but okay, now that we know that this is happening, let's just kill them off one by one. And it sort of like, we'll have that ending and it'll be complete, and we'll have the nice sort of wrap it up all in a bow. But from what I understand, that's how the book ends as well. But this one changes it to Pete winning, which is, I believe you say that it's either DeVry or DeVry, but it changes that he lets himself, I'll get to it. I'm going to get ahead of myself in a second, but like I want to dedicate an entire bit to the ending. But there's one character I loved that was sort of like documenting what they were all writing, like he was writing whenever they were talking about, but he ends up having an ankle injury, and man, do they show it. That guy was walking for a while too, but like the ankle's twisted like this, and you can see the bloody socks and them dragging along. And that performance by, I'm completely blanking on his name, it's Jordan something, he's great in it too. And I thought that Charlie Plummer's character, while being the sort of the Stephen King bully, essentially, I know that they changed him from being, I believe, racist to homophobic in this, has a brutal death of his own accord where he goes crazy and stabs himself with a spoon. I genuinely thought that character. One benefit to not having read the book here is the sort of unpredictable nature of who dies when in this, and him sort of letting himself go in a sense, because he starts to get kind of like he's losing sense of reality, and even says of one character, "I have plans for you," and it ends up being a red herring. That did not go anywhere, not in a bad way, but he did not do anything of the sort. And then towards the end of it, he kind of wants to be accepted into the group. He's like, "Oh, I didn't mean to kill that guy earlier," and then he just keeps apologizing over and over. And the deaths early on in this, you can tell, really affect the characters for the rest of it. And one that I genuinely think, I have said that this movie's hard to watch. It really is. There's a lot of haunting imagery in this. The performances are ridiculous in this movie. And Ben Wang is so good in this. I think that there's a stuff later that even somehow surpasses this, but this is going to be a moment in this movie that, yes, this is going to, I do think this movie is going to be a gigantic hit. If it's not a hit right now, I think that this is a weird movie to compare it to, but I think it's going to get like a The Menu type of response where eventually everyone's seen this, and I think it fully deserves it as well. But Ben Wang's character, I want to touch on that. I said that all of these characters have different motivators to them. His stands out purely because of a line he has where he says, "I did it all wrong. I did it all wrong." And then it cuts away because he's calling for art, and what ends up being a moment where you can just hear it, and they let him bleed out and die, and they say that it's like the most painful way you can go because he just sits there. But throughout the previous part of the movie, he's kind of like tuned out, and it can mean a lot of things. I think the reason why it's so just hard to think about is because we don't even know what he meant fully. Did he do the walk wrong? Did he do life wrong? And then we learn later that he had a wife this entire time, Clementine, and they're like, "Oh no, that can't be true." And the fact that it is, at least from what our understanding of it, adds an additional layer of what did he do wrong? Was he talking about life? Was he talking about this? There's a really kind of poetic line to me that's in this where he's chewing the gum. He's like, "This does not have any flavor anymore." And they're like, "Why do you keep chewing that?" And he's like, "Because I have a feeling once this goes, I'm gone." And there's a moment right before this all happens where he's staring at the gum, and it's coming. And the fact that they like let this all happen, it's just, there's a lot of dialogue in this. It's more dialogue driven than you might think. That really, really stands out. There's just a lot of conversations about life and how these characters got to this point and how they think and what they think. And David Johnson's character's entire motif about, I have always, like, it seems like he's the one that, he got through it all pretty successfully, was just like, "Look, I've been walking my entire life. I've always been walking from something. I want to start walking towards something." And so the ending, I'll get to in a second. I'm not going to touch on it just yet. But Cooper Hoffman also having a vengeful motivator because he wants to avenge his dad, and it ends up being this moral back and forth between him and David Johnson where he's like, "It might be hard, but I want you to see the light in the world every day. I think that the world is worth looking and living for because of the sky, because of the air around you." And I thought that was really beautiful. And so what ends up happening here, and then let's cut back a little bit further again, where there's one character that I think is a symbol of rebellion, and it's the one, I do believe that they cast someone of Native American ethnicity and background on purpose as the sort of symbol, kind of like, rebellion against the system, and how they're sort of the illusion of choice, that they're like, "Oh, you can volunteer for this," but really no one's volunteering. It's almost like a point of pride to enter into this and be selected and represent your country, which apparently was added to this as well, which is crazy because the whole representative thing of the country thing from somebody from each state. That is unbelievably good writing. That's crazy. That's cool. And it ends up being this sort of unifying national thing where it's like, yeah, America, we love America so much, we need to reclaim ourselves as number one. And then that's part of the whole, Vietnam belief as well. But it's also sort of what the American dream is sold as well. Like, let's go to America, let's fight for the whole entire ability to be number one, the ideals, the promise of the American dream, the promise that you'll get these riches if you just go through this hard trial and task. And this ends up being, the most blunt representation of that possible. And so all these characters, have a motivating belief. And there's one conversation right before, his name is, well, I cannot quite remember his name, but the rabbit, about him. And then it turns out that the major was his father the entire time. And he's like, I just have one thing. I want to be taken in under this. And then towards the end, whenever he's like getting sick, he's like, I'm starting to think that this entire belief I had this entire time, maybe this is futile. This doesn't make sense. And he accepts this and he dies. And that's one of the things where it was just like, it was a really kind of sad ending to this character, where they're going through days and days and days of trial, and they're on the brink of the edge of their lives, and they're coming to these realizations towards the end of them. Some of them accept it, some of them they're like, look, this is it for me, this is my way out, and they lose that motivator of life. And so really like leaning into that towards the end, these characters, I thought that the actor who was the one of Native American background, his way to go out on his own accord, I thought was really smart and really well written as well, because it ended up being like, no, I'm going to go out on my own terms, instead of the whole warning thing, which there's a lot of use of really, really brilliant sound design here, where they do show a lot of the deaths and then they ease up for a while and you can hear a lot of them in the background while they're having casual conversation, and it's really eerie because they keep having to hold these conversations while it's happening. And one other one that I really loved was, I believe his name is Art in this, and his one final request, he was like, my only request is that you guys just don't watch while they kill me. And he wanted to give the rosary to them. It was like a belief thing to his grandma. And it just ended up being so really beautiful and haunting about this, because there's one conversation much earlier on about the difference between crap and shit, like as words. And I loved that a lot, because it's sort of talking about belief system and all of these different things and what they believe in and why. And I ended up just loving each and individual conversation they had. The movie's humor is for sure, but it ends up being really about this core center of friends. The last remaining moments of their lives, they're literally marching to their own deaths. And it just ends up being just all these conversations, all of these beliefs, all of these things while they do this, and their emotions and how they were as people. You can feel, they feel very lived in. Their clothes are dirty and wet. And one moment I noticed in particular is while it's raining, all these characters are drenched and soaked, and then all of the soldiers, have the raincoats over them, so they're in this like pristine kind of condition. Every time the major comes out, they even mention this, he looks awake and clean and not bothered at all. And the sort of separation, it almost feels like they're in two entirely different worlds even though they're on the same path, was really, really smart. And so the writing here is brilliant, because there's even a moment that's so sad where a character, I wish I remembered exactly which character said this, but he said, I love the rain, do you think it's about to rain today? And he dies that day. And then in the very next scene it starts raining. And I know that rain is also sort of a kind of metaphor for a sort of, new day, a new light, the washing away of something. And so Cooper Hoffman and Judy Greer, there's a moment where Judy Greer, like, they're passing through his state and she sees him and he almost dies because of this. She sees that he's going, and then it's heartbreaking. I'm going to tell you guys right now, this movie I cried like 3 separate times. Ben Wang's, this moment with Judy Greer, and then this moment at the end. And she's like, no, keep going. Just keep going. And when she first sees him, because his shoe, like the bottom fell through, and he's like, look, it requires more effort, more energy to put yourself and apply yourself while you're on uneven ground, so just take them off right now. And so he walks the rest of it in socks, which on gravel, that's crazy. And what ends up happening towards the end, now we'll finally get to it. It is, I'm a gigantic Stephen King fan. He's arguably my favorite author. I think that he's a genius, even when he was, out of his mind in the 90s cocaine. And our 80s, Maximum Overdrive, oh my god. But Sleepwalkers. But at the end of the day, when that man has something to say, he has something to say. And I felt like the ending to this is, in theory, really, really satisfying, but once you give it more thought, immensely grim. The entire aspect of David Johnson's character is that he sees the light in the world, he sees the good in the world, and he says that if you do this, it sort of dims that light. It dims that, and there's no real way to really come back from that, from taking a life. He's like, you're not one of those people, to Cooper Hoffman's character. But Cooper Hoffman encourages them to keep going towards the end of this, and then he ends up moving back and no longer walking, and he gets shot in the head. And what I think is really clever about this is, yes, show it. It will be hard to watch, but in order to fully emphasize thematically and narratively that this is necessary, I thought that showing it was like, made you wince for sure. Made that like part of you just like sink, the heart rate just escalate for me for sure. If I had an Apple Watch, BPM would have been like through the roof, I bet. But what ends up happening here is he falls to the ground, and you hear the sort of like the silence, but then there's this haunting sound of the fireworks. Everyone's cheering that there's a winner, and then it shows that we just spent this entire movie with these characters. I think that only including audience to see it every once in a while was really clever, because they're out there to watch, and whenever they come out, it feels almost like this is the spectacle for them, that they love this, that like it almost feels like they're disconnected in a humane way, until you see Judy Greer, and obviously she has personal stake in this, but like this is entertainment. And I thought it was really clever we never see the cameras. It makes you think so much internally, like, what is this world, where are they? For me, my theory was that this is after an alternate universe where we must have like lost the Vietnam War or something, because Mark Hamill's entire thing is that we'll reclaim our identity and be number one again. And that ends up being an entire commentary on masculinity and what that means, and how these men are, young men by the way, are trying to perpetuate the ideals that we're supposed to believe in, who they actually are as people, because they are individuals. They are strong people at the end of it, but they also have to rely on each other to an extent, and that's okay. And some of the ones that go out the way that they intend on intentionally, they still end strong on their own accord, on their own belief and their own feeling, even if they lost that will, either because they couldn't match up to that they felt like they couldn't, or they, towards the later couple of them, they were like, you know what, no, this is my time. And so what ends up happening with Cooper Hoffman being like, look, you have that light, I don't, and you want this to happen. You want him to kill Mark Hamill. You do get the satisfaction of it. He asks for the gun, he asks for the carbine, and he shoots him. After this, though, I do think that this movie's ending is up to your own interpretation. I think that what happens towards the end of this, once he shoots him, and then the entire crowd just disappears. Obviously, narratively speaking, they just didn't just disappear. Was David Johnson shot? We don't know that for sure. They said that's uncharted territory. That's kind of up to you to find out. For me, it felt like maybe they let him go, but he just chose to walk away, and this is just he lost his entire thing. What makes this so grim and so haunting, and the reason why it'll be on my mind for such a long time, is because once he walks away, he loses his light. He loses that entire thing that he believed in, that he could still see the light in the world and could still see the good around him. And Cooper Hoffman making that choice, it ends up being a dramatic irony of a sort, where he loses that. And he keeps going, but to what end? Where is he going? Why? We don't know. That's up to your own interpretation. Maybe then it ends with the sort of like thought of, is there any real winner in this situation? Or is this just a thing that he went through and that's it? That's just like, that's the thing that he has to deal with and carry with him. Is he still alive at the end of this? We don't know. And I think that overall, this movie, just in terms of execution, was brilliant. It's so brutal. It's so hard to watch. And it's so timely and relevant in terms of what it has to say about trying to market to younger people as like, this is to commit to your own demise for the sake of the better of the world, or to fully believe in something that maybe will lead you to your own demise initially, but it also has a lot to say about the beauty of the world and what life is worth living for in the first place. It's worth living for friends, for the world around you, for the good moments. One aspect of this, that David Johnson's character, he says, live moment to moment. I think that's really beautiful. I think that's really smart. I think that this movie has so much to say. I feel like I touched on even just a few things, not even everything. And that at the end of the day, what makes life living for, I know that it's a joke. It's like, maybe the long walk is the friends we made along the way or something like that. I think I even saw a Letterboxd review that was like that. But that's kind of the point of this movie as well. But it's not even just the friends they made. It's what they have to say, what they believe in, their ideals, their motivators just in life. And this movie moved me. I thought that it's some of it's very haunting and is going to stick with me for a really long time. When David Johnson is over Cooper Hoffman's like lifeless body and he's screaming while they're singing this song and everyone's crowding around him and the fireworks are going off and they're cheering, is just so scary and so like hauntingly executed. But yeah, let's go ahead and give this a score. I have no negatives. I don't have a single thing negatively to say about this. When it comes at the end of the year, this is going to be immensely high on my favorite movies of the year. I don't know how often I can rewatch this. I will say I want to show it to multiple people. I want multiple people to see this. And if you got through the whole thing and you were like, no, I'm going to keep listening to the review anyway and hear what you have to say, go see it. Go see it, please. I think it takes a lot of the Hunger Games stuff as well. Francis Lawrence is just great at this stuff, honestly. Give it a score 5 out of 5. On a hot streak I had a great time at the movies this past weekend, for sure. Anyway, what did you think of The Long Walk? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Or are you somewhere between on it? I want to know. Have you read the book? What did you think of the book? Do you think the book is better? Do you think the book is worse? I read someone that did a review of this and they said they liked this even more than they liked the book, which, that doesn't happen all the time. But is this one of Stephen King's best adapted works ever? Yes, for sure. I loved it. It's going to be sticking with me forever. I'm so glad that I have like so many thoughts still. I want to bounce back and forth with people on this. What did you think of the characters? What did you think that they symbolized, their beliefs? What did you think of what they had to say as well? And Ben Wang, and that performance as well, that line, going to stick with me for a really long time. And anyway, what is up next? I believe, I really hope this is good. I'm so excited for it. Him by Justin Tipping and produced by Jordan Peele with Tyreek Weathers Yes, and Marlon Wayans looks so good. I cannot wait for that. But that's going to be up next. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching. Horror is pretty great this year, isn't it? I'll see you next time.